In this lesson, we are going to perform Spring Boot CI/CD with GitHub Actions and test containers. With the help of GitHub Actions, we would perform the unit and integration tests. The Spring Boot application for its integration test would be using Postgres that would be created via test containers in the GitHub environment. Once the unit and integration tests are performed, the test reports would be stored in HTML format. That report also would be available using GitHub Actions. So this is the standard Spring Boot application we are going to use for this particular lesson. It would be using a Postgres for performing certain CRUD action, and for creation of the Postgres container inside Docker environment, we are going to use test containers. So this is the sample Spring Boot application which uses Postgres, and during the integration of this particular Spring Boot application, we are going to use test container. Just to show you the test class, if I go inside test folder, I have three classes. This one is unit test. This one is integration test using container. And this is another one. We are going to ignore it. Let me open the existing integration test. Here, if I scroll down, you can see over here, we are using a Postgres container. This would be used in the test method during the integration test. If I go back to this repository, in order to follow the steps, you also need a similar repository. So what I would suggest, you can fork this particular repository into your GitHub account. Same way I have done it over here from this particular URL, which is github.com j2expert 2015, and then this particular repository name. I have clicked on this fork button and forked it inside my GitHub account. And from here, we need to perform certain steps to perform the CI/CD using GitHub action. But first of all, let us have a basic understanding what is GitHub action and what we are exactly going to do. So what is GitHub actions? It is a CI/CD plus automation built into GitHub. It lets you automate workflows directly from your GitHub repository. In GitHub Actions, the core components are like the following. You need to define a workflow file. Inside your project, there would be a folder which is .github/workflows. There you can create one YAML file, and this defines when and how to run the automation. There is a concept of triggers. These are basically the events that will start the workflow. It could be code push, it could be pull request, it could be manual run as well. And inside the workflow, we have the concept of jobs and steps. A job is basically a set of steps running on the same runner. By runner, we mean machines that execute jobs. These machines are provisioned by GitHub Actions when we start our workflow. And step is basically an individual task. You need to perform the checkout of the code. You need to run the tests. These are basically steps. One or more steps are inside the job. These jobs are orchestrated by the workflow. So that is the high level overall structure in case of GitHub Actions. So in our case, flow wise, what will happen? The dev team would push the code for this Spring Boot application into the repository in GitHub. From GitHub, this workflow would be triggered in GitHub Actions. GitHub Action in turn would create an environment where it will perform certain tasks or certain steps. It would check out this code from this GitHub repository into this environment. Then it will perform Maven build, unit, and integration test. And during integration test, with the help of test container via Docker, it would create the Postgres container, and the Spring Boot application would communicate with this container while we are running the integration test. Once the unit and integration tests are run, the basic test files or artifacts would be generated. Generally, those are XML and text files. And then using those, we would be creating HTML reports, and those reports would be stored inside GitHub Actions environment so that those could be accessed to check the test results for unit and integration tests. So that is the plan. Now we understood the basic concepts. Let's start working hands-on. As we discussed earlier, we need to create one YAML file inside our project, inside .github/workflows folder. And here we have one file already created. This is the integration test YAML file. If I open it, Here we have the steps or instructions that we are providing to GitHub Actions. We have configured that this would be triggered on push or pull requests or workflow dispatch, which is for manual activity. And here we are mentioning the branches also. It is pointing to the main branch. Now we have the job. The job is running on a particular Ubuntu instance. This is the image that is mentioned over here. And these are the steps. First step would be checking out the code. Second, JDK 17 would be installed. The distribution and Java version is mentioned. If I scroll down, we have the step to cache the Maven dependencies. Then running of integration test. This is simple Maven command, mvn clean verify site. Once the tests are run, then we need to upload the JUnit test results and the HTML test reports as well. Let me scroll down. So here we are uploading the JUnit test results, which are basically XML or text files. And then we are uploading the HTML test reports so that we can access them after the tests are run. Now, if I go back over here, our YAML file is ready. Now we need to trigger this in GitHub Actions. How to do that? You need to click over here, this particular icon, Actions. As I have forked this, it is giving me this message. Workflows are not being run on this forked repository because this repository contained workflow files. When it was forked, we have disabled them from running on this fork. Make sure you understand the configured workflows and their expected usage before enabling actions on this repository. I'm clicking on this button. I understand my workflows. Go ahead and enable them. If it is your repository and you have not forked, ideally this message won't come. Let me click here. Now GitHub Actions are enabled. Closing this. So here under Actions, under all workflows, it is showing the workflow that we have created, integration test with test containers. And it is showing this has a workflow dispatch event trigger so that we can run the workflow. So if we click this particular drop down, it shows the option to select the branch. We have only main branch. So I'm going to keep this selection as is and click on run workflow. Now, after a few seconds, this has started integration test with test container. Let me open this in new browser tab. We can see this is manually triggered. The status is in progress. Total duration is not updated yet. Artifacts is blank also. I'm going to open this one also in a new tab. So here, all the steps are basically going on. The first steps like setting up job, checking out code, setting up the JDK, these are already done. If I open this one, run Maven integration test, I can see initially it is downloading all the dependencies. This is a big log actually. Now we have post cache Maven dependencies, post setup JDK 17. All the steps are mentioned over here. I can see everything is run. Let me go back here. It's showing green. This is complete. Now I want to check the artifacts just to see what is the output. If I click over here, I have two options, HTML test reports, JUnit XML reports. Let me download this one. Download seems to be completed. Extracted. This gives the target folder. Inside that we have site and we have three reports. This is the main report, project reports.html. Here I have unit test report, surefire, and integration test report, failsafe. Going inside this, we can see this has been executed. This is the class. This is the method or the test case. Similarly, if I go back to failsafe, here I have this integration test. This is the controller, order controller with test container IT, and these are the test cases. Basically, we have a single one. So the tests are run and we have the results available as well. So this is how we can perform the Spring Boot CI/CD with GitHub Actions using test containers.